Alright guys, welcome back to Conquer and Commander. Today we're going to be taking a look at my Nin the Pain Artist deck. This is a fun little goofy deck that came about just because I wanted to play with some of the cards that I don't really get to usually play with. For the complete deck, let's go to puremtgo.com, look it up, my article series Conquer and Commander, and you will see it printed out nicely and neatly like this. We'll also have a link to this in the video description as well as soon as the article goes live. I'm actually still in the process of putting the article together. You can see it all there nicely and neat. So anyways, like I was saying, the deck is actually built around a couple of cards that I really just wanted to play with. The first card was Ral Zarek. Ral is just a goofy card that I can't ever see myself putting into any other decks, honestly. And then, and I'd never seen him actually played in a Commander game. And then the other day I actually saw Mercurial Chemister being used, and I was like, wow, that's a cool card too. So, since both these cards were Izzet cards, I figured I should make an Izzet deck, and then Nin the Pain Artist is a card that I hadn't really seen used that much either. You know, looking at her, she deals damage to creatures, and then the creature's controllers get to draw cards. So you can use it on your own creatures in order to draw some cards, but you've either got to have some high toughness creatures that can handle being dinged, or you can use it on your opponent's creatures and kind of work around that as well. I have seen a couple of different Nin decks in the past, even though I didn't go either of these routes. The first route was essentially like a mono blue control route where the deck really doesn't use red and uses Nin just as a draw effect. It steals a lot of creatures with cards like Vidalcan Shackles and some other effects, and it just pings them to death, gets rid of them with Nin, and then draws more cards into more control. The other way I've seen it used is to really use the ability to give your opponent's cards to a benefit with the use of cards like Sudden Impact and other stuff that really hurts them for having a big card hand. Ebony Alnitske, stuff like that as well. This deck isn't as controlling. It does have a few ways to really abuse the draw. Let's just take a look first at the multiple ways where I use Nin to my advantage. The first is Basilisk Collar. Obviously, she's a pinger, and turning her into a one, giving an opponent one card to kill off a problematic creature usually works out okay. Not always, but it does sometimes. The deck originally had much more of a pinger feel to it. It had stuff like Kumano Mastery Yamabushi and Spike Shot Elder and stuff, but I ended up taking that out because, like I was saying, the deck took so much mana already that I just couldn't afford to pay the mana that I was feeding into them. We've also got Illusionist Bracers, which works well when you're targeting your own creatures. Darksteel Plate, which is good for that as well. Magebane Armor, I never actually drew this, but it seemed like it would work well. Number one, it improves the toughness of your creatures, but number two, preventing the damage that you do from Nin doesn't prevent you from actually drawing the cards. So, you can just pump a ton of mana into it, even attempt to kill your own creature, and it won't die, and you draw the cards, so that's good. Charisma's fun because you get to steal creatures with it, and I did manage to use this once or twice as well. I'll be honest, it's a really fun card, but it's not, Nin herself isn't very resilient, so Charisma doesn't tend to last very long. Psychosis Crawler obviously works well when you're drawing cards. Stuffy Doll, you can pump, beat the crap out of Nin, draw cards, and then ding somebody directly. Consecrated Sphinx works well when you're targeting an opponent's creature. You get to draw that many cards. Double that many cards, so that works out as well. Niv Mizzet, again, works well when you're targeting your own creature. And then finally, Vicious Shadows works well because you can force feed an opponent to have a lot of cards in hand and then use Nin to kill off creatures as well. Vicious Shadows usually worked really well in this deck. So these are like the main Nin cards that worked really well. As you can see, there's not really a whole lot that you can do with Nin, so it was more like this deck doesn't have like a real big theme per se. It's basically just a bunch of fun cards that I like to play with, all mashed into a deck. And so let's take a look at the rest of the deck. These are all your draw cards: Ancestral Vision, Rhystic Study. Let's start at the top. Mind Unbound. Again, this is a card that I just don't usually play with, and it seemed like it'd be fun, so I threw it in the deck. And it worked out all right. Mercurial Chemister can remove or deal with creatures as well as drawing cards. Steam Augury is another fun, goofy card that I just wanted to play with. And this card led to some really difficult decisions. It's not nearly as difficult as playing with Fact or Fiction, as a matter of fact, because you know what's in your hand, and you want to make sure that you split up the piles as best as possible. There's some mind screwing around as well with it. So it's a very fun card, though. I highly recommend Steam Augury. And then I've got Jace the Mind Sculptor and Jace Beleren, both of which are obviously good in terms of drawing cards. The Destruction is mainly the red, stuff. Steel Hellkite, Inferno Titan, again, works really well with Basilisk Collar. Chain Reaction, Blasphemous Act, both wipe the board, can wipe the board of creatures. Karn is your way of dealing with enchantments and other problematic issues. Viashino Heretic, Chaos Warp, Mizium Mortars, Vandal Blast, and then finally we've got Voidstalker, was a card which I have never used before, but was very good at tucking opposing commanders and dealing with them like that. One thing, this is the version that I played the most. One thing you may notice is that there's no like universal sweeper like Oblivion Stone or All Is Dust, and I'll be honest, I really would recommend putting in something like Oblivion Stone specifically. Even though All Is Dust would work out pretty well for you for the most part, there's Oblivion Stone right there. Because there are a decent amount of artifacts in the deck, I think Oblivion Stone would work really well. So check, I'll leave it up to you to decide what to put in for or take out for Oblivion Stone, but it's definitely worthwhile. Let's take a look at our mana help. We've got Gilded Lotus, Solemn Simulacrum, Darksteel Ingot, Grim Monolith, Journeyer's Kite. Like I said, the deck was really mana hungry, and so you just needed to be able to pull out as many lands as you could. Izzet Signet, Expedition Map, Mana Vault, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt. And then on top of that, we've got Tezzeret, who can search up mana artifacts as necessary, or untap them to get extra mana out of them. And then Ralzeric really usually ended up working out mostly as a mana generator by untapping stuff like Gilded Lotus. I rarely used the 3 damage to somebody ability. And I'll be honest, with the +1 ability to tap down an opponent's permanent, or tap down any permanent, that rarely came up. It was mainly just the ability to untap your permanent. You could also give your creature pseudo-vigilance with him as well. I actually never came close to ultimating him because people were really afraid of Ralzeric, which was good because it meant that they focused on him and not me personally. So I was happy with him doing that as well. There's only really 3 counterspells in the deck: Mana Drain and Counterspell, plus the Archmage, which I rarely play with, and I decided I would give her a shot to shine in here as well. There are a decent amount of tutors in this deck. We've got Fabricate, because there are a lot of artifacts which would be helpful. And again, if you put Oblivion Stone in, Fabricate would work well. Thada Adel works well with searching up stuff from your opponent. Trinket Mage, Mystical Tutor, and Gamble are all decent tutors. Finally, we've got like sort of our minor Nin theme here. These are cards that sometimes worked with Nin and sometimes didn't. Mimic Vat. The problem with Mimic Vat is that it costs 3 mana to use it, in which case you didn't have as much mana to pump through Nin to deal to whatever token you had. The Outcast actually worked out better because the tokens were free and they were high toughness, so the dragons weren't, they worked out well because, you could draw 4 cards off him and he would still live. Curry Keep, you didn't care about keeping the kobolds around. You could just pump as much mana as you wanted into the little tokens and you'd be happy. And then Manamo could be used to untap Nin, especially if she had Basilisk Collar. Finally, we have kind of like our catch-all. This is stuff that I just enjoyed playing with or wanted to play with. Goblin Welder worked really well for me several times because there are a high amount of artifacts. Buried Ruin is recursion along with Academy Ruins. Mizium Trans Reliquat was awesome. I enjoyed the crap out of this card. Again, this is another goofy card that I wanted to play with. And it could copy a Steel Hellkite or a Psychosis Crawler, or if necessary for extra mana, you could have a copy a Gilded Lotus. It was just a fun card, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it could copy, like if you had a Phyrexian Metamorph that was out there that copied something, it could copy whatever the Metamorph was a copy of. I believe that's how it worked. I'm pretty sure that's how I got it to work at least once. Thassa, I hadn't had a chance to play with, so I shoved her in here. She actually worked out all right. Being able to scry every turn isn't bad, and then making stuff unblockable is actually way better. There's the Metamorph that I was talking about. Wormcoil Engine, another good artifact. And if you killed it with Thassa, you could generate 2 extra tokens. Urabrask was good just at keeping things tapped down from opponents, which would give you an extra turn to do stuff, as well as giving your own stuff haste. Rootwater Thief, people hated this card. Hated it. Being able to search your opponent's libraries and then exiling stuff, it worked really well in terms of like being able to figure out what people were trying to do, getting rid of really problem permanents or any cards, problem cards like Ulamog and Eldrazi and whatever other stuff. People hated him, so he must be good. The Chronologist was just a goofy fun card that I had playing when I was using him in Vorel, and so I decided to throw him in here. And he ended up, being a lot of fun. Gilded Drake is good at stealing stuff. Cyclonic Rift is just a nice answer, and then Lightning Greaves. The mana base has 2 artifact lands, Seat of the Synod, and Great Furnace. Teleria West is in here so that you can search up Reliquary Tower. And then there's a lot of like dual lands in here because you really kind of need both the red and the blue mana. Deserted Temple is in here just to work with stuff like Maze of Ith. I put the Workshop in here. I'm not 100% sure it really needs to be in here. I never drew it while playing this deck, and I never searched for it, so it probably wasn't that big a deal. I went with Maze of Ith and Mystifying Maze because, again, there's not a ton of creatures in the deck, and it's nice to have the defense. There's the Reliquary Tower. Strip Mine is the only land destruction spell, really. And then Thawing Glaciers helps out with getting the mana you need. Vesuva worked well because I usually used it to copy opponents' Reliquary Towers. But you could also do the double Thawing Glaciers thing as well. And that worked out. So that's the deck, like I said, it doesn't have a primary goal. It's just a bunch of fun stuff that generally works well together. I mean, I'm sure there's ways you could make this like a pure Nin deck and go overboard with her ability if you wanted to, but I found that this was enough destruction to keep me going, and it did pretty well. Let's look at the stats here. Like I said, I worked kind of hard at lowering the average converted mana cost, and it's at 3.29 right now. The curve is a nice little bell curve. This 9 mana one is actually Blasphemous Act, which is usually something that you can cast for 3 or 4 mana at the most. It is a primarily blue deck, but there is a decent amount of red. And you know, there's like 4 or 5 planeswalkers in the deck, which is, you know, kind of planeswalker heavy actually. So that's the deck really. You know, not a whole lot to say. It's just, you know, some mana ramp and some random destruction and some goofiness, and then Nin to help you draw cards. So it's a fun, goofy deck. It doesn't do anything specific. One of the issues that I also had with the deck is that it doesn't really have like a finishing game plan. It doesn't have like a real like screw you, I'm gonna win right now kind of card. If you really wanted something like that, you know, you could always put in Rite of Replication, and that actually would be pretty good in the deck, I think. But it would be up to you to decide what you wanted to take out for that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the games and the deck, and we'll go from there. All right, thanks a ton.